All right, well, welcome everybody to this meeting of Carpinteria Birdwatchers for November 5th, 2020. Good to see you all here. Excited to have a chance to think about birds, talk about things that are not part of the larger news universe, just our little local bird news for an hour or so. I mentioned, I think last time that this is not maybe as prepared a meeting as I have done most often recently. I don't have a presentation really laid out, but we have 3 topics to talk about, and I'll sort of step through those, and feel free to interrupt and unmute yourself and ask questions, and we'll just see how far we get with it. But probably it'll be a little bit shorter meeting than usual. But so before I jump into those 3 topics, does anyone have any fun birds they've seen in the last few weeks that they want to share about? Brody, tell us what you've been seeing.
I actually saw. I saw 2 rentits. Yeah,
Nice.
I was out in my little house that I have. It's just like a little workshop, and I heard a rentit, and then I look over. I see one just on top of the bushes. Calling. And it was really cool. I tried to get a picture of it all that day, but I couldn't get a picture.
Yeah, they are easy to hear and surprisingly hard to see. They stay tucked away in the brush. Well, that's great. That's great that you saw them.
Yeah, and also, do you know the best weather to go birding?
Well, I guess the facetious answer is the best weather to go birding is whatever the weather is right now, because it's always good to go birding. It's like that bumper sticker, the worst day fishing is better than the best day at work. But, in general, if it's super windy, that can be hard to bird in. I was thinking about that as I was reflecting on the Christmas count last year when we got really windy in the afternoon, and it definitely made it hard for us to see many birds in, because the birds hide, they go into shelter and they don't necessarily want to be out when it's really super windy. With the exception, if you're at a sea watch site or maybe a hawk watch site, a lot of wind is actually good because those birds will use that wind and they'll be moving around in it. Yeah, other than that, I guess the other sort of weather condition that is sort of known for being good for fall birding, at least during the migration that we're sort of in now. I guess we're kind of at the tail end of the migration now. But if it's very overcast with a dense marine layer, that tends to be very good for fall migrants locally here along the coast, because the migrating birds sort of get held down by the cloud cover. So they accumulate. They like if they're heading south along the coast, they want to go up and go to their destination, but the clouds keep them down. So they sort of build up in these little like if you have a grove of trees, like a riparian habitat, like Carpenteria Creek habitat, places like that, they will accumulate in these so-called migrant traps. And that's because they're sort of, staging there, waiting for their chance to continue their migration. And if you get a good 3 or 4 days of strong cloud cover that never really clears, that will get you an ever-increasing supply of migrants in those habitats, or at least so I have been told. I can't really verify that from my own experience, because I just go out whenever.
Yeah.
John?
Yeah, go ahead, Brody, and then Emrit, I'll take your question.
And at the bird refuge on the little island, I saw 3 American white pelicans.
Oh, that's right. I saw there was a list from there that I saw that you had put in eBird. That's great. Yeah,
I was hoping that you would see it.
I did in fact see it. I've mentioned it before. It's sort of my daily news as I scroll through and look at what lists have been submitted in Santa Barbara County, and I'm always interested in seeing what's out there. And and I was up there at the Andrea Clark Bird Refuge looking for the black tern that had been seen there, which I failed to see because I was out of town the day it was there. So by the next day it was no longer around. But I was surprised to see a couple of American white pelicans there too. I guess they've been hanging out there. And Rita, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, have you, or is there any notation of any barn owls around? Because there was an article in Coastal View today, and I haven't seen any in years. I was just wondering if you know of any sites.
Well, I see actually Nancy Baron just joined us a minute ago. Nancy, I don't know if you want to unmute and talk about your barn owls. It looks like you're away from your computer. She may be getting herself all set up there. But yeah, I haven't heard one that I can remember in the last week or so, but you do occasionally hear them in the evening. You know, they have that scream that they make, that kind of, you know,
Right.
kind of sound they'll make when they're flying around. Or they also have that sort of ticking sound, like that tick, 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 as they're flying around. That can be fun to hear those. Yeah, I have not heard one lately. I mean, I know there are a few of them around, but I guess, you know, maybe the trees in my neighborhood aren't as conducive to them being here as they were years ago, because I used to hear them a lot more, I think. And now I don't think we have any hanging around right where I am.
And then I wanted to ask, have you seen anything interesting at the salt marsh recently? Because I've noticed very little. I mean, I've seen some, you know, night herons and, you know, a few
Yeah.
other commonly seen birds, and the ducks, but it looks very, there seem to be very few birds there these days.
Well, you know, I have not been birding at the salt marsh as much in the last month or so as I typically have done in the past. I've just been birding other places. I have seen some interesting lists from there where they had as many as 7 yellow-crowned night herons, I want to say. So that's kind of exciting, because, you know, that species was a former rarity that we have more of now. And, you know, other than that, it's like, you know, at low tide, you can maybe get shorebirds. They'll be out there on the mudflats. At high tide, this time of year, you start to get more ducks. So, you know, keep checking it out. But yeah, I have not been in there as much myself lately.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Anybody else before we jump into the official content? Jenny, I see you waving. What fun thing do you have to report?
We have Acosta's hummingbird back in Carpinteria near Franciscan Village. And I don't know what the chances are, but last year at this time, we had a juvenile male there. And all of a sudden now we have a adult male, same spot.
Yeah.
And last year he was there for 3 months, I think. And so it's exciting. Could be the same bird, I'm guessing.
I think that is an excellent guess. Yeah, I think it's very likely the same bird. And we can talk about that when we get to the third of the 3 topics I want to talk about today is the upcoming Christmas bird count. And I certainly remember how exciting it was that you guys got that bird at last year's count. I'm hoping very much that you will get that bird on this year's count. So, you know, put out your nectar feeder or do what you have to do. Chase the neighborhood cats away. Make sure that bird makes it to December 19th, because we definitely want to have that species if we can get it. Okay, anything else before we jump into the big sit? This is your last chance to unmute and let me know if you have something to offer. All right, well, it's great to see you all, and definitely jump in at any time. I will go on now and talk about the first. Oh, Brody, you got your hand up again? What other fun thing do you have?
One last thing. I just wanted to say for Halloween, I did with all my family. I was a hummingbird.
Oh, wow.
And I got these big wings, and we used fabric spray paint and painted them, and yeah.
And do you have a photo of that to share?
I'll get it in a minute.
Okay, if you want to make it your virtual background, you could replace your very gorgeous scissor-tailed flycatcher you have there, and we'll be able to check it out that way. Okay, well, yeah, thanks for sharing that. Okay, so the big sit. So back on October 10th and 11th, which was a weekend, this event called the Big Sit took place. And we talked about it at a previous meeting, so you probably heard about it already. But it's organized by, I want to say, I can't remember the name of it, again, poorly prepared.
New Haven Bird Club.
The New Haven Bird Club, thank you very much. So the Big Sit is this endeavor where people go out and they have a, I believe, 17-foot diameter circle. Does that sound right? And basically you go and bird from that spot over the course of a day. And it can be as much as 24 hours, midnight to midnight, or people can do, you know, a lesser amount of time as they have the energy and interest. And, you know, it's actually, it's a really fun activity. You know, it's a neat way. It's like a fun game to play. Like, you know, I'm going to constrain myself within these boundaries. What can I see from one spot? How many species, how many different individual birds? And I had never done one before, but Linus Blomqvist, who's here in the meeting, He mentioned it on the SBCO birding email list locally, and it seemed like a really neat idea. So I, along with a number of other people, participated in it, and it was fun. I had a really good time. And so I wanted to share a little bit about my big sit list, and then I want to really get to and share Linus's big sit list, because Linus's big sit list was very impressive. And we'll talk about that. And I know, Linus, you have a cutoff time. You can't be here for too long, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on my list before I get to your list. But I want to build the excitement towards your awesome list. So I want to cover mine really quick, and then we'll get to yours.
That's good.
Okay, so let's see. I am going to share my screen. And I'll do this, and we'll do this. And this should work. Okay, so if I've done this correctly, you're seeing my browser window. And let's see, here's the blog post about this meeting at carp-without-cars.org. And here is my big sit list. So the way the big sit was conducted this year was you reported your results via eBird, which worked fine for me because I'm always putting my bird list in eBird. And one thing that was a little bit, I don't want to say confusing, but just not quite ideal, is that in order to share with them, you needed the whole thing in one list, right? They wanted you to share with the New Haven Bird Club eBird user. You can see I shared my list with here. But they just wanted a single list. And I got there at about 6:16 in the morning when it was still dark out, because this was before we went off daylight savings time. And was there until about, what's it say, 8 hours, so until about 2 p.m. That was as long as I could hang in there. I basically got to that point. I was like, I like birding, but this is enough birding for me for today. And although I did bird on the way up and the way back down from my spot, so there's a little more than 8 hours. But that's a very long list. And in eBird, they like for you to, in terms of the scientific value, they like for you to chunk your lists up into shorter lists. And one thing in particular they say is they don't want you to have lists that span nighttime and daytime. Like they want to treat nocturnal lists separately from daytime lists. So I actually did create a lot of smaller individual lists, but then I merged them all together into this list you're looking at here. And I'm planning to delete this list shortly. This is just here for sharing purposes, so I could share it with the people at New Haven Bird Club. So as you can see, I had 47 species plus 5 other taxa. So like, for example, I saw one duck and it was very far away. A recurring theme in my big sit was that I was up there on this hill and I had a very distant view of the coastline, a very distant view of Santa Barbara Harbor, very distant view of the Burnham Wood golf course that has a pond. So I was able to identify a few species, but they were at extreme distance. So in one case, one of them was a duck, which I put on the list because I didn't have any other kind of duck. So I felt that technically that should count as an extra tick in my grand total. But I couldn't identify it to species. So anyway, scrolling through, these are the birds I identified from up there. And to kind of show you where I was, here is the map. So I was basically at the Romero Canyon Fire Road Hawk Watch site where this red pin is here. And I wasn't there because I thought it was going to be a great big sit location, because it really doesn't have ready access to a lot of different kinds of habitat, which is really what you want for a good big sit. But I wanted to be up there anyway because I was still very gung-ho about trying to see a migrating broad-winged hawk. I didn't have my broad-winged hawk for the year yet, so I wanted to spend that day up there. And I didn't see one all that day, but then 1 or 2 days later, I did manage to see one in the same area, so I was happy. And it was, fun thing to do while I was up there. But so to just kind of show you where I was, I'm basically up here above Montecito, and up in the hills. So I had some chaparral birds around me. As I say, I had views of different parts of Santa Barbara, very distant views of the harbor. I think I identified a brown pelican at the harbor. That was about the best I could do through my scope. But that was basically my big sit. And then I had a few gulls flying along, and I decided that one of them I was confident was a western gull, so I got to put that species down too. All right, so that was my big sit experience. So I was happy. I felt very good about that list. Enjoyed it. But let's talk now about Linus's list. Linus Blomqvist up at Haskell's Beach. So that's just west of Goleta, right? That's, you just get out of the developed area as you're traveling west, and that's one of the first places on the coast you come to. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And I
I
had
don't know if
never
you have the
birded there
map.
before. Yeah, let me go to the map. I have that.
Might be helpful.
Yeah, so here's sort of the aerial view. And then if your Sandpiper golf course over here, that golf course in Western Goleta you pass on the way out of town. And then if we zoom in a little bit, so you were on sort of this
Yeah,
knoll,
so
right? It's
an interesting place. It was actually not my idea originally to go there. I got the tip from a birding friend. It's not as usual, like John, you've been everywhere in Santa Barbara County birding, but you haven't been here. And it's not, not a lot of people go here. There's probably not like a huge reason to go there just for birding if you're just sort of going around and looking for different species. But like a good big sit site is not necessarily the same as a site you'd go to for some kind of, for a specific kind of birding. If you're looking for eastern warblers, you'd go somewhere else. If you're doing sea watching, you'd probably go somewhere else. But there's really not a lot of places where you can get that diversity of habitats. And it's much more important to get the common species from a variety of habitats than to get like very special, particular species.
So I definitely want to go bird here. Now that you've shown me, like, oh, there's this great spot that you can see this many species in one location.
Yeah.
Is the access fairly easy? Can you park and walk in there? Did you need any special access to get in there?
No, it's easy. So there's you can sort of see a little bit left of the dot says Haskell's Beach. Just sort of in from there. There's a hotel and there's a parking lot right by that road there.
Is that this is the parking lot, or
no? You go up there until you see the first road there, and there you go. There's the parking lot.
So right down in here, kind of.
Zoom out a little bit and then go down.
Oh, this, yeah.
Yeah. So that's a big parking lot. Very easy. It's actually a nice beach. I run there a few times to like meet socially distantly with friends in the evening. It's a very pretty. And then you place.
And you just walk down this road to the beach area. Is that what you did?
Yeah. So then you walk down that road and then you kind of turn left and loop up onto that little hill. So you go up this path.
Yeah, and then this way, kind of.
Yeah, and then you loop exactly.
So then you're up here on the hill.
The interesting part, and it's like I thought quite a bit about where to do the big sit because I thought, oh, maybe Coldwell Point and like Dever Slough would be good. I thought about a variety of other places, but you have to have that circle with 17-foot diameter, and you have to see everything well. It's not like Coldwell Point. If you can walk around a few hundred feet, or even like a few hundred yards, you can cover a lot of habitats, but there's no, one point.
There's no moving around. You just have one spot.
Yeah, there's no moving around. So there's a spot here, and it's like, if you moved it a few yards, you would miss a lot of species.
So from that
spot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can actually see. Obviously, you see the ocean well.
Right. You got a good view of the ocean, so that's good.
Yeah. And then you see a good amount of beach, especially east. And then you have looks like a little lagoon. It's a little drier right now than it looks on that map, but there's some water there. And like some marshy stuff and like a mud flat type of habitat. If I were to go to Haskell's for like general birding, I would check that out because, you can have some good shorebirds there. That's actually where the northern water thrush was too. So there's a whole bunch of species that I only saw in that particular lagoon.
And was it your experience? Like my experience was a lot of the species I was getting, like it was challenging. Like it was requiring me to be able to identify a very distant view of a bird, much farther than ideal for bird watching purposes. But, I could combine flight characteristics or knowledge of the bird and the habitat, like what bird is that likely to be, there was a little bit of fuzziness in some of the IDs, but I tried to limit it to ones I felt pretty confident about.
Yeah, you have to work pretty hard. I also left. Some of them I put in my eBird checklist is like unidentified. I think I have swift and accipiter and swallow.
Yeah.
So some of those I really couldn't ID. I just put some, unknown species.
And you were there for a good long time. You have 12 hours and 40 minutes for your list. So
yeah,
I'm impressed. I mean, 8 hours seemed like a long time to me once I finally got that far. It's like, wow, am I done yet? This is a full day of birding.
So there's a couple. If we go back to the map for a second, I'll show a couple of more things, because what's nice about this location is you actually have a good view of the mountains too.
Oh, yeah,
so I got the hawk.
Oh yeah.
You can actually get like a little bit of hawk migration and that sort of stuff happening. Plus you have some trees, so you get some warblers up there on that spot.
Yeah, and then I guess this is sort of like coastal sage scrub habitat that you're in.
Yeah, so you got like rented and things like that as well. So a little bit of
I mean, that plus the beach, plus the ocean, plus the little bit of freshwater wetland, that's a good diversity of habitats.
Yeah, it's actually hard to beat. I'd be interested in, I can't think of a better place, like near Goleta at least. I'd be interested to hear anyone else's ideas.
Yeah, well, you've certainly set the bar. So for next year, I'm certainly excited about the idea of trying to do this and trying to do better than I did this year. And
yeah, so there's a couple of things in terms of just how the day went. Maybe you could go back to the checklist.
The list? Sure.
I won't like follow it species by species, but the morning is really like fast paced, because everything, you never know, even if it's a common species, you don't know if you're going to see it again. And a lot of these, you have like one of them.
Yeah.
If you kind of scroll through, it's like one of the, this one of the other one.
Yeah, you have one black-bellied plover. You don't want to overlook that one if it comes zipping by. You want to make sure you get that on the list.
So I was like really looking, plus like the fact that you have like 5 different habitats and 5, many different directions to look at. And I had a friend join for like 2 hours in the morning and another one for 2 hours in the afternoon. It helped in the morning, particularly. But much of the day I was alone, and then you're just kind of like, you wish you had eyes in your neck, sort of at the back of your head. So you're really like, especially in the morning, you're kind of like moving around a lot and within your little circle and looking in all the different directions, and the species come in pretty quickly. I think I had like, I had 50 by 9 a.m. or something like that. Then as the day proceeds, they come in more and more slowly. And you also get a kind of like, you're starting to see the gaps in your list. So then you're like, okay, I'm missing this one species, but I know where I should be able to find it. So you kind of like really focus on it.
Yeah, you can concentrate your attention. You can actually start actively seeking specific birds.
So like, I didn't have a California gull, and I was just like going through all the gulls over and over. I didn't know Harriman's gull until pretty late in the afternoon, and I was also like really picking through each of them. Actually, I was moving occasionally outside the circle.
Which the rules say you can do.
You can do, and you can't count anything you see from outside the circle, but you can, like, if you can ID a bird from outside the circle and go inside the circle and see it, that's legal.
Right, or the vice versa. You can hear rustling in the bushes and catch a glimpse of something and go over and see what it actually is and then count it in your circle list.
Exactly, yeah. So from like 10 yards outside my circle, I was seeing a Herman's gull for like 45 minutes. It was just that it was impossible to see from within the circle. So I was like staring in that direction for a long time.
You're like standing on your tiptoes like, oh, if I could just catch a glimpse.
And I actually managed to get 2 species of shearwater, which also involved staring really hard at the horizon through my scope for a long time.
And I know that that's something you've done a lot of before, because you were in our Sea Watch, discussion in a previous meeting. So, and I assume, getting both those species from the shore here on the South Coast, I mean, that takes either luck that they're in close or very active work with your scope to look at very distant birds and know their flight characteristics well enough to identify them.
Yeah, you have to. They're far out. I mean, they're like more than 2 miles out. But they're, they are distinguishable by general flight pattern. You can see bits of structure, that sort of thing. The last the last bird I saw was, so a couple of times I've seen a peregrine from Colwood Point. I see peregrine falcons every now and then, and they come out, they land on the oil platform. So when it was like dusk, I thought, I wonder if there's a peregrine falcon sitting on the platform, because it has like a favorite spot out there on that platform. And so through my scope, I saw the like little dot, and it like moved its wings around just enough that I could be pretty sure that it was a falcon. And then it's kind of like, it's a peregrine falcon that would go out there and sit on the platform.
Awesome. So again, yeah, your pre-knowledge, your prior knowledge was very important in being able to make that ID confidently. Yeah, that's okay. Well, I wanted to give people a chance to ask questions. If anyone had any questions for you about your big sit, this is a good opportunity. If anyone wants to chime in and ask any questions. I mean, I can keep asking questions, Drew. I guess one thing I would be curious about, you had mentioned, and I think I talked to you about this before the meeting started, you had said in your initial discussions of this on the SBCO birding email list that it had been, the opinion had been offered, the pronouncement had been made that this, well-known local birder was saying he didn't think that anyone would get more than 70 species in a Santa Barbara big sit. So I asked you before if it was okay to ask you, so I'll ask you now, who was the person who made this pronouncement?
Mark Holbrand said that, and I can say that because you can actually find it in the archive of the email list. So
he's not in public saying that. So you proved him wrong, which I'm sure he's as happy as anyone about. Because that's exciting.
It is, it is the highest count on a big sit in Santa Barbara County so far. Yeah, and I know up the coast a ways at in San Luis Obispo County at the south end of Morro Bay. I forget what the name of it is, but there's a count they do there, and they're actually number 1 or number 2 worldwide in their count. They get over 100 sometimes because they've got a really good spot there. Yeah. So Brody, I saw you had a hand up. Did you have a question?
I wanted to ask Linus what he thinks the best spot to see white-tailed kites are.
I actually have a pair that there are several places. I think you can see them at Lake Los Carneros pretty often. I don't know if that depends on the season, but many times I go there, I see them. There's a pair that hangs around here where I live, actually, like just a little bit north of, on the kind of northern end of Isla Vista. There's also, actually, I saw a couple of kites from my spot, and they're over the Sandpiper Golf Course, and I think that's a place where they hang out sometimes too.
And we also have, I think, at least 2 of them at the Carpinteria Bluffs recently. So a little closer to our end of the county road, Brody, if you get out to the Carpinteria Bluffs, definitely check the tall trees for white-tailed kites, or sometimes they're flying around the meadow. That's a good spot to see them too.
You can see them at the salt marsh sometimes too.
And at the Carpinteria Salt Marsh, yeah. There's some various places you should be able to see one if you're lucky.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, did anyone else have a question or a comment for Linus before we let him go?
What time during the day did you see the great horned owl?
That was right in the morning. Like when I got there at 6:20 or something, I heard it walking up the hill, and I was like really hoping I'd be able to hear it from within the circle too, and like almost rushed up there. And there's actually a couple, I think. I hope.
Yeah, you had 2
I recorded
on the
both of them. Yeah, they were both kind of making sounds early morning.
Yeah, I was happy that one of the few species that I got on my list that you did not have on yours is I also had Western Screech owls. They were vocalizing from Ramiro Canyon, and I was in the same position. I was hiking up in the dark with a flashlight and heard them in the canyon, and was really trying very hard to get to my circle before they stopped, so I could hear them from my circle, and I just managed to do so. Okay.
Yep. I'll offer, if there are more questions, I'll offer one reflection on the big day or big sit.
Sure.
Because I had actually kind of expected it to be boring for like big parts of the day. I thought, oh, it'll be fun in the morning, and then it'll slow down, and I'll just be sitting there, waiting, and it'll be pretty dull. Maybe because the species kept kind of coming in with some regularity, but I really enjoyed like the whole time, and it sort of told me something about birding. I typically kind of like, you know, like you go to a place and you sort of like try out and you see what you can see for a couple of hours maybe, and at most, and then you kind of move on to the next place. It's pretty rare that you sort of just like sit down in one place and you know, even once you've seen like most of the species you'd expect, you stay there, and actually more and more things keep coming in, and you get to appreciate like it's like the birding, like slow cook, you know, slow cooking is like this is like slow birding, and it's actually really really enjoyable, and it gives you a different sense of like location, and you can appreciate yeah, just kind of taking it a little easier when you're birding. Plus, like you wouldn't think that you'd see 72 species by just sitting in one spot.
Yeah, that was, again, very impressive. And I'm looking forward to next year, and we'll see if we can raise the bar even higher.
So John, this is
yeah.
Kim.
Hi, Kim.
Hi. So I'm kind of new to this. I don't know this big sit. What is it? I got on late, so I don't even know what this is.
I'll just recap really quickly, and also, you know, you can go back and the YouTube live stream afterwards if you want, and you can check out the first part of the meeting where we talked about it in more detail.
Okay.
But it's an event that's put on by the New Haven Bird Club, and on a particular day, October 10th or 11th this year, people go out and have a 17-foot diameter circle, and they bird watch from within that circle and see how many species they can see in the course of a day. And Linus went out locally to a place up near Haskell's Beach and saw 72 species in his big sit circle. So I was very impressed, and I asked him if he'd share about it. So that's what we've been talking about.
That's great.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah, okay, well, I'm going to go ahead then and wrap up this part of the meeting, and we'll move on to the next part. But thank you again a lot, Linus. I know you have to leave at some point fairly soon, so I really appreciate you taking time to share about your big sit.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm gonna drop out now, but have a good rest of your meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks, yeah.
Yeah, bye.
Bye. Okay, so the next part of the meeting that we are going to talk about is this question or just a brief discussion about using the sbcobirding email list and the resources at eBird to help you keep track of rare birds that have been seen in the area, or how you would go about using those tools, or at least I can talk about how I use them. Other people can share if they use them in a different way. You know, I don't have a lot of detail about that, but I can share that, you know, my experience with bird watching and birding, the more sort of active pursuit where you're focusing on the size of your list, and you're trying to add new species, and you're sort of running around and making it into a bit of a game to see what you can see. Back when I started doing that as a young birder, you know, really the only resource you had for that kind of information, or the only resource I had, were these rare bird sightings recordings. And LA Audubon Society had a version of this, and some other Audubon societies had a version of it, where you would basically call a number and there was a recording you could listen to, and they would say, oh, you know, this is the Los Angeles Audubon Society's weekly report of rare bird sightings as of such and such a date. And the person would read the list of birds that had been seen and where they had been seen. And if you had a bird to report, you could, you know, call and leave a message, and they would collate these and update them. And it was fun. And for, you know, those sort of extra rare birds that were very exciting, you know, people would use this as information to tell them where they could go try and chase after this bird and see it. And then I want to say in the, like maybe around early 1990s or so, I'm not sure about the exact dates when this started happening, you started to get, people started to all get connected via email, and they could use listservs. They could use shared email lists where you could basically, you know, send and receive messages on a particular topic with everyone all over the world. And these regional birding listservs came into existence. And the SBCO birding email list is a legacy of that era, and it's still around and still actively used these days. And let's see, if I share the screen, I can show you what the website for that looks like. Let's see, get my big sit list out of the way. So here, if you just, you know, Google for SBCO birding or SBCO birding email list, you can find this pretty easily. And these days it's set up via groups.io, which is just a website that has these mailing lists associated with it. And you can go look at the messages. You can view it online in a web browser like we're doing now. And you can just go, click on an individual message to see what someone has recently said. Or you can sign up for the email list yourself, and then you'll receive new messages sent to the list at your email address. And I do that, and a lot of other people do that. And it's, it's a very useful resource. You can find out, if there's some good bird that people are seeing in Santa Barbara County, they will usually post a message about it to the SBCO birding email list. And so if you're keeping track of that, you'll find out in the middle of your day, and you can start having that fun discussion with yourself where you say, well, let's see, I'm supposed to do this thing for work, but there's this really good bird and it's 20 minutes away. So if I take my lunch hour, I can go see the bird if I'm lucky, and that sort of thing. Or you could, wait till you have a better opportunity, maybe go see it after work. It's the more responsible thing to do, which of course depends on how good the bird is and how exciting it is and how important your current work deadline is. But that's a resource that not a lot of, that a lot of birders who are new maybe don't know about. So I definitely encourage you to check it out and use it and post to it, like send your own messages to it. It is, there's this, as eBird has become a popular resource for similar kinds of things, a lot of people use eBird and they tend to use the SBCO birding list less, maybe, because it's no longer the only game in town. And occasionally you see these messages from people sent to the SBCO birding list like, hey, don't forget about us. There was this really neat bird that you folks were out looking at that you knew about because of eBird, but no one bothered to post it to the mailing list. And I don't use eBird, so I didn't know about it. So you will get those occasional pleas, and I try and do my part. I could be better about putting everything on the mailing list. But I try and remember, if I've got a good enough bird, I will make a point of getting it on there so that people know about it. So that's another tool that's useful to use. And then I also wanted to talk about eBird and how you use eBird to keep track of rarities. So if you go to eBird, and you need to have an account there. So presumably you've got your eBird account and you've logged in. If you go to the Explore option on eBird and scroll down, there is this section that talks about alerts. And if you click through to that, you can set up email alerts where you can basically tell eBird, oh, I want you to send me an email when a rare bird is seen within this specific area. Or I want you to send me an email when a bird is in this area that I don't have yet on my county life list or my county year list. And it's configurable and you can set up different ways. These are the 4 alerts I have set up currently. I've got my Santa Barbara needs list, which is if there's a species I don't have yet that I haven't reported in Santa Barbara County, that will send me an email about it. I have the rare birds in Santa Barbara, so that's a slightly different version of that. That's if it's a rarity, regardless of whether I've seen it before or not, it will send me a notice about it. I have the same thing for Mono County because I spend time up in the Eastern Sierra sometimes and I want to know what's around. And then I have the year needs list for Santa Barbara, which is, in this case, it's kind of redundant with that needs list. And this is even more specific. These are sending me alerts about birds I haven't yet seen in the current year in the county. And you can click through if you want, and you can kind of see what those reports look like. It's a little slow to click, it has to put it together for you. So this is the last 7 days. It's basically showing me. So in the last 7 days, these are the eBird sightings that have been reported in Santa Barbara County that I don't have on my county year list. So, and I have this configured on an hourly basis. So once per hour, if there's a new entry, it doesn't send me an email every hour, but if there's something new that's happened in the last hour that I haven't been emailed about, it will send me an email about that once per hour. So as you can see, there were all these emails about the black tern. This was the one day in the last month when I wasn't around. I was down in LA visiting family. And that was the day that a black tern showed up at the Andre Clark Bird Refuge. So I was sitting there getting these alerts all day long about, oh, the black tern's here. Still here. Oh, it's still here. And I was like, 150 miles away or whatever it is, and unable to go chase after it. I was there the next morning, but it had moved on. So that's the way it goes. So that's a way to keep track of what's out there and available to be chased if you're interested in chasing after birds. you know, and if you want to set up, the way you set up one of these is you come down into this lower part of the page and you just, you know, tell it the region you're interested in. Like I could say Santa Barbara, there it is. And then I could, you know, this is for rare birds, you know, anyway, that, and you can set it up and you configure it for hourly or daily, or however you want to do it. So are there any questions about any of that? I realize I've just been kind of babbling. And you're all very good about keeping yourselves muted, so I'm not distracted. But yeah, Brody, you have a question?
I just set it up a needs one since you showed that to me.
Great. Yeah.
Because I had the rare birds, but I didn't know there was a need.
Yeah. Well, I will warn you that it's fun and it's kind of addictive, because you get down to where it's like, oh wow, you know, there's a bird up in Santa Maria that I don't have on my list, and I could, let's see, you check. Maybe you don't have this problem as much because you're not going to just jump in a car and drive for an hour and a half to the other far corners of the county to see a bird. But yeah, it's exciting, and it's, you know, as you see those alerts coming through, you know, sometimes it for me at least, it kind of pushes me over to the, like, there's always this go no go decision. You know, am I going to go chase after this bird, and what are the chances I'm actually going to see it? And you know, if people continue to report the bird, if it's a rarity, and then, you know, oh, Margin Don Thornton saw this bird, and oh, Mark Holmgren saw this bird, and oh, Linus Blomqvist saw this bird. It's like, okay, people are seeing the bird. I really, yeah, that makes me much more inclined to actually go there and see if I can see it too. Okay, any other questions? Yeah, Tom, I see you got your hand up.
You may have said this, so I'm sorry if I missed it, but how does eBird and Santa Barbara Birding, how do they connect?
Yeah, thank you. That was kind of the whole point of this discussion, was someone asking about that. The one thing that I was actually supposed to address, I completely forgot to mention. So if you don't want to sign up for these eBird alerts, you don't want to have an eBird account, or you just don't happen to use eBird, you can still see what is in effect the daily version of the Santa Barbara County Rare Birds alert. Because I think it was Jamie Chavez, I'm not sure, one of the people who administers the SBCO birding email list has set it up so that once per day, the daily rarity email, the daily rarity, so rare birds alert for Santa Barbara County is posted to the mailing list. So if you go back and look at the mailing list, you can see that once per day, this message gets automatically posted to it. And this is what it looks like when you get this rarity alert email, if you're signed up for it in eBird. But if you've signed up for the SBCO birding list, you will see a copy of that in that mailing list, regardless whether or not you signed up at eBird, because it gets posted automatically to the mailing list. So does that make sense? Yeah, I see you nodding and talking, although you're muted, Tom, but hopefully that answers that question.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah.
And you know, the rarity list is basically based on the filters that the eBird reviewers have set up, where they have this kind of elaborate table where they say, okay, for each week in the year, you know, which birds are considered rare or not. So a bird might not show up in the rarity list one week, and then a week later it suddenly is showing up in the rarity list. He was seen both times, but at one of those times it was considered rare, like they're not supposed to be around anymore. Like this has been happening for me lately, where there's we have hooded orioles at our hummingbird feeder in our backyard. Well, just a few days ago, a female hooded oriole showed up in our hummingbird feeders. I'm like, oh wow, that's unusual. They're supposed to be gone. So I took photos and posted about it, and it tripped the rarity filter. So, you know, a month ago, eBird wouldn't have cared about that at all. But now every time I see it in my backyard, I feel like, oh, I've got to get a photo, or I've got to put in more detail, because it's a rare bird. It has to be described.
So did swarms of people show up to see it as well?
No, it's not that rare. It's not that exciting, and it's in my backyard, so it'd be hard for them to see it.
But is that what it does do? The rarity alert.
You know, that's a good question, and people have asked me about that before. You know, and this comes up in connection with the Christmas count that we're going to talk about next. It's sort of the last topic we're going to talk about today. But as part of the Christmas count, we do a lot of scouting, and we're trying to figure out where are the rare birds in the area that are hanging out in the area. So hopefully we can see them on the count day. And if someone has a particularly rare bird, they will tell me about it, which is great because I can, put it on our list of birds to try and get on count day. But if it's a particularly rare bird, maybe they don't want birders from, LA and Ventura, all throughout Santa Barbara showing up and tromping around in their yard looking for a bird.
Right.
My sense is that in order to pull in a bothersome number of birders, it would have to be a really rare bird. So like, for example, when, Eric Culbertson found a gray hawk, up by Santa Claus Lane, up by Padero Beach Grill, that was a first California record. There had never been a gray hawk reported in California before. And, a day or two later, there were, 50 cars parked along there and birders with their big spotting scopes and big cameras and binoculars, walking up and down the road trying to see it. Because for everybody who really cares about their California list, or for a lot of birders, maybe they just have never seen a gray hawk before because it's not found around here. They showed up to try and see it. So if you're going to report something like that, like a first county record or a first state record in that case, yeah, you would maybe want to consider, not reporting it if you really don't want people to show up looking for it. But, if it's viewable from the public road or it's viewable from, it occasionally is something to think about, but it's unusual to have to worry about that. It's unusual for it to be a rare enough bird that you'd need to be concerned about that. Nancy asks in the chat, how do you check to see when a species occurs here, e.g. Phainopepla? When does it typically depart or arrive? That's a good question. And you can find that with eBird. Let me go back and look at that. So we're here in eBird. I would say go to the Explore link in eBird. And eventually this will load up. I apologize for my slow internet. I think this is actually slow eBird. I don't think I can blame my internet for this. I think eBird itself has been a little slow lately. There's been some kind of issues with eBird not loading very quickly, like it's not loading the images now. Let me force a reload, try one more time. We'll just have to be patient. Back in the olden days, when I was using the internet in the 90s, boy, you'd put in a request and you'd wait for like 10 minutes. You'd go make a sandwich before the page would come up because we were all sharing one modem, and it was, yeah, so this is not ideal. It is not loading the form for me. Well, I will just describe it for you. So if eBird were being more responsive right now, I would get a search form here in the Explore Species area, and I could type in the name of the bird, Phainopepla. Okay, here we go. It's finally coming up. So, and you can just type in a little bit of it, and it will pop up that choice. So I've selected Phainopepla. And if you're interested in when it shows up, really what you want to do is you want to tell eBird that you care about a specific region. So typically you do that at the county level. So I'm going to come in here, and where it says data for world, I'm going to change it to data for Santa Barbara, California, which is the county. And then it will load, where it is seen. And it gives you this weekly bar chart. So you can see from that actually we have Phainopepla throughout the year, at least at the county level. Now they may move around. You may find them in different places at different times of the year. It looks like the bar gets a little thicker in the summer months, May, June, July. But for the most part, they're around all the time. Yeah, Brody, did you have a question?
I was just gonna say, yes, because I used to have them all the time, and now I can't see a single one. And yeah, it's just.
So Phainopepla in particular, they are frugivores, right? They are fruit eaters. So it kind of depends on what's fruiting in the area. If you have like mistletoe, they really love mistletoe berries. If you've got a big oak that has some mistletoe in it, if it's got berries on it, good chance you can see a Phainopepla there. They like some of the other berries, like lemonade berries. I think I've seen them hanging out around, toyon berries, different local species that produce fruits at different times of the year. That is probably a factor. I'm not an expert on Phainopepla distribution, but the other thing you can do if you're anxious to go see a Phainopepla is you can use this sightings map in eBird. And you can, so when you're zoomed out a certain amount, it just gives you the shades of purple where the denser shades are more frequent reporting of the bird. But as you zoom in, and if you click this checkbox to do this sooner, you will get to where it will start showing you individual markers for where it's been sighted. And then you can kind of see very specifically where has it been seen, and the red markers were sightings from the last 30 days. So, you know, if you were very interested in going and finding a phainopepla, you could scroll around here and say, oh, there was one up here at La Cumbra Peak, probably is what that is. Yeah. So the Clethaby had one up there, what, today. So there's definitely phainopepla around if you're willing to move around and look for them. And some other places in Santa Barbara. You know, looks like we had a report here. This looks like, oh, Tiffany Levin up on Shepherd Mesa. So this is a good example. This location, so this is not a hotspot. This is a personal location that somebody has used. But I know because this same person, Tiffany Levin, whom I don't know, posted a rose-breasted grosbeak at their backyard feeders. And I actually did a version of the thing that we were talking about, where I kind of showed up and walked along the road in front of their house, kind of trying to see if I could peek into their backyard and see their rose-breasted grosbeak. And I did not see it, but I was also mindful of the fact that, you know, someone you don't know walking around looking into your backyard with binoculars is not necessarily the thing that makes you feel, you know, comfortable. Like you're maybe going to say, hey, excuse me, why are you looking in my backyard with binoculars? Oh, I'm just really interested in the rose-breasted grosbeak you reported from here yesterday. So I have yet to see that rose-breasted grosbeak, but it's funny to me to see she's also got a phainopepla up there. So you can go up to, you know, Shepherd Mesa Road and walk around and see if you can see a phainopepla at her place, if, you know, it's okay with her. Maybe, you know, there were, you know, people are usually very friendly. If you see somebody say, oh, by the way, I saw that are you Tiffany? You know, I'd be interested in seeing this bird. She wasn't around. I couldn't have that conversation. So I tried to just be somewhat discreet, you know, not too scary looking or obnoxious, but I did walk back and forth past their house 2 or 3 times though, just kind of casually looking like, oh, what's going on? You have that bird over there. Okay, so
So John,
yeah,
if I put a rare bird in my eBird list, who makes the final call? And I'm not just looking at a mallard and I think it's a rare bird.
There is this process of review that takes place, and there are regional reviewers, and there are several of them in Santa Barbara County, I believe. And I know because I run into them occasionally when they send me an email and say, hey, by the way, this bird you posted a photo of does not really look like it's that bird. Yeah, there's if it trips the rarity filters. So when eBird prompts you and says, oh, congratulations, this is a rare bird, can you supply additional details? What they're looking for is for you to describe, you know, what did you see? If you have a photo or a sound recording, that's ideal, because then they can just evaluate that. But if not, they want you to give a description of what you saw and why you think it's that bird. So they are looking for, you know, what are the specific features that you saw? How well did you see them? How did you exclude other possibilities, which is a very helpful thing for you to include, because that lets them know, oh, you know, this person knows to look for this feature or this other bird it might have been. Because a lot of times when you're reporting a rarity, you know, there might be a more common version of a similar looking bird, and they want to know that you actually are confident it wasn't that more common species. But then it's not super obvious to you as a user that they have confirmed or not confirmed the bird, because it will continue to show up in your list. It's not like you'll get some flashing neon, you know, banner on the eBird list that says, oh, this bird is not confirmed. What it does though is it won't show up in these kinds of searches like we just did here. Like Tiffany's phainopepla probably is not tripping the rarity filter, you know, because it's found throughout the year in the county. But if it had been a species that trips the rarity filter, then it would have to get confirmed before it would show up in these search results. It will show up in the rare bird alerts. So those alert emails, they include both confirmed and unconfirmed species. So that's good to know. Like when you're seeing those things show up, and if you're making the go, no go decision, be aware that if a person has misreported something, you know, maybe don't chase after it right away until you see that confirmation, or, you know, I mean, again, you can evaluate that on your own. And the way they've set it up to include the unconfirmed birds in those alerts is based on the idea that people who care about those alerts want to know as soon as they can. They don't want to wait a day or however long it takes for the reviewers to review it and either confirm it or disconfirm it. Yeah, Brody, did you have a question?
I just saw on the eBird thing, like right here, I went to the wood duck and it says that someone has seen a wood duck today. And
nice. Where did they see it?
I will check. They saw it on Rancho Jurupa Park.
Wow, I don't even know where that is. So
No,
that's,
neither do I.
but if you go and you go to the eBird list, you can typically, click through it. It will show you what the location of the list is. So you can find out where this spot is if you don't recognize it. And this kind of relates to another question that Nancy asked in the chat. She said, one more question. If I want to see what, say, Tiffany Levin is seeing in eBird, how do I search her lists? And here's the thing. If an eBird user is using a hotspot, then it's relatively easy for you to browse and find what they have submitted. Or if you are looking at all the lists submitted recently in Santa Barbara County, they'll show up regardless of whether they use a hotspot or a personal location. But with the exception of the last week or two, which you can see if you go to the Santa Barbara County regional page in eBird and you can look at the recent checklist, you can see all the submissions. If a person is using a personal location, it is trickier to see their lists because if you go, if they're using a hotspot, you can go to the eBird page for that hotspot and see the list of all the submissions at that hotspot. You can go back and see in time, who has submitted checklists here. But if it's a personal location, you can't browse to that personal location. It doesn't give you an index that lets you see that. So the trick that I have ended up using, if I want to see what birds are being seen in an area that doesn't have a hotspot defined, is I will search for a commonly occurring species, which is a little bit haphazard. You're counting on the fact that someone, would have reported that. Like if I wanted to, I could look for, well, phainopepla is a good example. So you can see that phainopepla has been reported up here on Shepherd Mesa at a number of different places around here. These little, eBird pins, and you can click on that and you can get a link to the actual checklist. Like here's Nancy's list, right? And then you can click through and you can see her list from that day. And you can read whatever detail they put in there. And oh, this was at the Christmas count, which is a great segue because we're going to talk about Christmas counts at the end of our meeting, which we should probably get to. But it just so happens that it included a phainopepla in the list. So that's why it came up when I searched for phainopepla sightings. But if I didn't include the name of a bird that shows up in that list, it would be hard for me to get that pin that I got that allowed me to click through and see this older checklist. I'm not sure if that made sense. It makes sense to me because I do this all day long. I'm in eBird way more than I should be probably. Okay, so, and then I have one more question from Kim. Is eBird the preferred app for birding? If I've been using another, can I transfer my sightings? Yes, you certainly can. There's a way to import your older checklists, depending on what format you have them in, into eBird. I don't want to say eBird is preferred. I mean, it is, I think, gaining in popularity. And at this point, probably a majority of the active local birdwatchers that I know of are using eBird because it's just very useful. And also, you're contributing data that's of some scientific value. So you can feel like, our silly hobby of running around and making lists of birds is actually doing something good for the world. It's helping us keep track of bird populations and their trends. But not everybody uses it. And some people are, sort of strongly opposed to using it. And that's fine, bird the way you want to bird. No one has to use eBird. But I find it very useful. But then I'm also kind of a, nerdy internet computer user kind of person. So I was always going to like it just for that. But I think it is a very useful tool. And if you can get over the technological learning curve and figure out how to use it, it will reward you and it will help your birding. Yeah, Brody, do you have something else?
I was going to say, I prefer, and number two, I was gonna ask, do you know if there ever was such thing as like a greater goldfinch? Because I know there's such thing as a lesser goldfinch.
That is an excellent question that I have no idea what the answer is. I mean, we have the American goldfinch, right?
Yeah.
And there's what I would refer to as the European goldfinch. I'm not sure. I mean, that's what it's called in North America. I don't even know if it's called, in Europe, it's probably just called goldfinch. You know, so my guess, and this is just me making this up, this is not any kind of authoritative source here. You know, we had a goldfinch in European birders or European naturalists back in the 1700s and 1800s had the goldfinch, and then Europeans came to North America and they, oh, here's this other goldfinch. Well, we'll call this the American goldfinch. And then they continued to explore and they found there's a slightly smaller one out there in the West. It's, oh, it's the lesser goldfinch. That's my guess about how those common names came about, but I don't actually know.
Yeah, because I've always just wondered that, because with a bunch of things, there's the lesser yellownape, the greater yellownape, the lesser flamingo, the greater flamingo. I don't get why they would name one bird without a greater.
Yeah, it's a good question. The whole bird names thing, as you know, because you've been coming to these meetings for a long time, there's interesting and sometimes controversial questions around what do we call these birds, and people care deeply about what we call the birds and who gets to name them and what they name them, and it's really a fascinating subject. But I've already kind of gone beyond the point that I wanted to get to before we talk about the Christmas count. I want to make sure we talk about the Christmas count. So is there anything else on the subject of eBird and SBCO birding? And I'm happy to answer. I mean, I'll talk about this thing all day because again, I love it and spend all my time using it, but I also want to finish in a reasonable time.
So I just wanted to ask, are there any areas that are like restricted that one shouldn't be putting into? Like I was up in Kachuma off the 154, and I realized I was up there today, and I realized I looked at the sign and it said that it's a private ranch. It's like a third generation ranch that now I guess is going to be a preserve. So I did count birds there. Is that legitimate?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and I guess the only good answer I can give is it depends. It's a case-by-case kind of thing. There are places that people have access to for whatever reason, and they're there birding and they're reporting what they see there, but they want to let people know you can't just show up here and bird here like this. And the way that that's typically done is in eBird. If it's a hotspot location, it'll have restricted access in the name of the hotspot. And what that's telling you is, don't just, you see this bird in this list and you want to see it, don't just assume you can walk in and see this bird here, because there's some sort of access restriction. And it's actually become sort of a gray area, right? There are places where people are birding because there's really good birds there, but it's maybe technically not officially allowed for them to be there, but the property owner has some sort of casual agreement with the birder, or at least, they're sort of aware of each other and no one seems to have a problem with it. But if a birder who's birding an area like that, where they have sort of a long-standing kind of low-key agreement maybe with the people whose property it is that it's okay for them to bird there, if you see a rarity there, it can become an issue, because you go there, you see this rarity, you report it in eBird. Well, if it's rare enough, there's a dozen other people in the area probably want to go see that bird and will go there and see that bird based on your report. So you kind of want to warn them. And sometimes I think people, well, I know for a fact, there are cases where people don't want to report something on eBird specifically because their access to that location is a little bit unauthorized. Like it's okay and they're getting away with it and no one seems to be concerned about it, but they're also aware that if one person every couple of weeks birding this spot maybe is not a problem, but if there's 5 people a day showing up there, it may become a problem. And they might the person who reported that bird might actually lose their access to it. And in general, the rule that I believe everyone should follow is you know, if you don't know, assume it's not okay to bird somewhere, you know, and there are birders who take the opposite approach. Well, if I don't know, then it's okay. You know, if they haven't told me I can't be there, then I can be there. And I think it's much better. And certainly as we get into Christmas count season and I'm, you know, in discussions with various property owners, trying to get them to give permission for us to go in for the Christmas count to bird on their property, I would like very much to promote the idea that you take the opposite approach to that and say, I should get permission before I bird somewhere. If I, you know, if it's along a public road and you can be there safely, then I think it's totally fine to assume that you can bird there, you know, and you can report birds from there and you don't have to worry about this issue. But when you're talking about, you know, going onto private property to do it, that's when you need to be more sensitive. And, you know, if you have access to the property owner and you can discuss it with them and they can say, sure, that's fine, then great, you know. And if you can have that discussion, say, hey, you know, there's a rare bird here. Would you be okay if half a dozen people show up here looking for this bird? And if they're fine with it, say, yeah, sure, fine. And then you're good to go. If, you know, but again, every situation is going to be different. You're going to have to kind of, you know, game that out yourself and figure it out. And I guess the other thing I will mention about that, there are some sensitive species, and owls are one that comes up a lot. And I've talked about this before, but maybe not all of you were in that meeting, so I'll share it again. One of the reasons why I use the SBCO birding email list somewhat less than I use eBird in terms of reporting rarities that I've seen is that I have been burned before by my own mistakenly, you know, ill-considered reporting of a rarity on the SBCO birding list. Specifically, long-eared owl was the one that I did this back in 2017 or 2018. There was a spot I was birding. It was really cool. I heard an owl. I thought, wow, and I made a recording and thought, could that be a long-eared owl? I haven't seen a long-eared owl. You know, I mean, not in the area. This would be neat. So I posted to the SBCO birding list about this sighting, looking for opinions about this long-eared owl. And within a few minutes, I got an email from one of the, you know, local experts saying, number one, yes, that's a long-eared owl. And number two, we would actually prefer not to advertise this roost location. We don't want people to know about it. And unfortunately, because it can disturb the birds, if people show up and use playback of recordings, you know, to try and identify the owl, to get it to respond, that can make the owls leave the roost, and it's a sensitive species. And so anyway, lesson learned. Before you go reporting a really rare species, if it might be a sensitive species like an owl, rare owl, the SBCO birding email list is forever. Once you've posted to that list, you can't really take it back. So eBird, at least you can go delete a checklist or change it if you find out that you shouldn't have advertised something there. So that's just one warning I'll let people know about on that same topic. Okay, anything else before we go on to talk about the Christmas count? It will be a very quick talk about the Christmas count because after not preparing, I was worried we wouldn't have an hour's worth of content. We're already well over an hour. So I appreciate everybody hanging around this long, and I don't want to miss my chance to promote the upcoming Christmas count. So anything else before we go on to the Christmas count? Okay, so let's talk about the Christmas count. Let's see, I'm still sharing my screen. Maybe that was a mistake to share this long, but that is fine because here we have, I can show you this. So at the Carp Without Cars blog, where I post about these meetings, there is also a page you can find over in this right-hand column. It says Carpinteria Christmas Bird Count. And if you click on that link, it will take you to this page. And that is the page for the Christmas bird count. The Christmas bird count has taken place for, I want to say we're like 100 and some odd number of years, like 120 years, 110 years, somewhere in there. It's been going on for a long time. And the history of it is originally this was the Christmas hunt. And on Christmas Day, there was this thing that New Englanders or East Coast folks, you know, back in the late 1800s would do, where there was this tradition that you'd go out on Christmas Day and you'd shoot a bunch of stuff. And you'd see how many different birds you could shoot. And this was a fun, exciting activity. And, you know, I can certainly appreciate the fun of trying to bag as many birds as you can, because I certainly participate in a very similar kind of thing when I go out birding, with the crucial difference that I'm not killing the birds. So people concerned about wildlife conservation back in that era made this conscious decision, you know, let's promote an alternative to the Christmas hunt. And what they promoted was the Christmas bird count. And the idea was you'd go out on a day around Christmas and you'd see how many birds you could identify. And as the Audubon Society came into existence, they became the umbrella organization for this activity, and it's been going on for more than 100 years now. And it is, in fact, the longest running citizen science project. That is, we've got data going back to over 100 years of birds that have been seen in different places at this date in the wintertime. It's actually very useful for finding things out about long-term bird population trends. So it continues to this day. And I want to say 10, 11 years ago, you can see I'm very poorly prepared, I apologize. 10 or 11 years ago, Rob Denholtz created the Carpinteria Christmas bird count. And so each Christmas bird count takes place within a 15-mile diameter circle. And if we go look at this map, so these are the Christmas bird count circles in Santa Barbara County. And if you could see it, there's a Ventura Christmas bird count circle that's right next to us. This is the Carpenteria circle here on our southeastern side. But basically, Rob figured out, you know what, we've got room to drop a little 15-mile diameter circle there around centered on Carpenteria. And so he did. And Carpenteria Christmas bird count was born. Rob organized it for many years, very capably, and I was an avid participant in those counts. And then a few years ago, he was looking to retire from that role. It's a lot of work organizing the Christmas bird count, and he was looking to get a break from that. So he asked me if I would step in. And so for the last couple of years, I've been organizing the Carpinteria Christmas bird count, and I will be organizing it this year. And basically what we do is we pick a day during this 3-week count window. And the day we are picking for this iteration of the count is Saturday, December 19th. It is the first Saturday of the 3-week window. And I very much encourage anybody in Carpinteria Birdwatchers, anybody watching this who has any interest at all in participating, please participate. It's a lot of fun. It is not something that you have to be a particularly expert bird watcher to participate in usefully. I am very aware of the fact, having organized a few of these now, that I need bodies, I need resources. Santa Barbara count, the Santa Barbara Christmas count, this one immediately to the west of us, this is a national powerhouse. This is a count that is in the top 10 Christmas counts pretty much every year. If they don't get 200 species for the day of their Christmas count, they feel like they're doing a poor job. I would love to operate in that realm. The Carpenteria count is not operating in that realm. We're like the little kid that the big count next door beats up and takes our lunch money every year. No, they're very kind. And I also participate in the Santa Barbara Christmas count. And I try and learn their secrets so we can apply them in the Carpenteria count, because there is a sort of friendly competition. But again, we're not operating on that level. The Santa Barbara count, the Carpenteria Christmas count, we've had 158 species is our highest total ever. And we've had that 2 or 3 times. Last year we had 156, we fell a little short. We've never made it to 160. Rob has confided to me that, his dream for the count is that one day we will get to 160. And I take that as a sacred trust he has handed off to me that we're going to get to 160 one of these years. And it takes people to do that. Really, one of the big things that the Santa Barbara count has that we don't have is they have a lot of participants. They have a couple hundred people helping them out for their count. We get up around 70, 75 people in a good year in the Carpenteria count. So the more folks we can get, the better. I'm not sure that's a hand wave from, and I don't even know your name, but I think of you as Brody's grandfather. Baxter is what your screen name says. Were you looking to say something? No, you're just getting comfortable. Yes, we've been going a long time. Let's wrap this up. If you are interested in participating in the Carpenteria Christmas bird count, you go to our blog at carpwithoutcars.org, click on the Christmas bird count link, and it will take you to this page. And there is a link to a sign-up form. And if you click on that, it takes you to this online sign-up form where you input your email address and your name, and there's some other information. And when you submit that, it comes to me, and I can use it to include you in the count. This year, it's a little different in that we have a pandemic going on, which turns out makes a big difference. So just, I talked about this, I think, in a previous meeting, but I'll just cover it really quick. The National Audubon Society has said to the local count organizers, we want you to wait until November 15th to make a final decision on whether to even have your count or not. So we're tentative at this point that we will have it on December 19th. A final decision will be made on November 15th. Assuming things with the pandemic have not become so problematic that we wouldn't want to have the count, we will have the count probably on December 19th, but look for this information on this webpage to be updated with a final decision in a few weeks. Some things we will do differently this year is, so everything will have to comply with county, local, state COVID-19 guidelines. So we won't be having in-person get-togethers for planning. We won't be having an in-person compilation dinner at the end of the day, which we typically have had, and it's a lot of fun. We're going to have a Zoom meeting, a compilation Zoom meeting at the end of the day is what we're likely to have. So we can keep our distance in that sense. If you are participating in a group that includes people who are not all part of the same household, so you're not in the same COVID bubble, then it's important that there be no carpooling. So you're only participating with these other folks outdoors, and that while you're doing it, you're maintaining 6 feet plus social distancing and or using a mask. The group leaders, so the people in charge of reporting the results from those individual groups, I will be talking to as we get closer to the count and do some organizing. And the group leaders, individual group leaders, will be in charge of that for their individual group. So, you know, if you're part of a group that includes a group leader and you are not the group leader, please follow the instructions of your group leader. So with all that said, I think we can probably have a pretty good version of the count in spite of all this. Again, it's going to be, you know, individuals or people in smaller groups, primarily people who are already in the same household, so they're not really adding to their exposure by mingling with the same people when they go out birding. And that's a lot of what we have in a typical year anyway. But there'll be more information coming about this as we get closer to the event. I encourage you, this is a lot of sort of gloom and doom I'm sort of covering here, but it's a really fun event, you know, and I think it will be really fun this year as well. And I think there are 3 main goals that I have as an organizer of the count, 3 main things that the count can accomplish, that I'm trying to accomplish with it. One is the continuation of this census, that we're basically gathering useful scientific information. And, you know, for the last dozen years or so, Carpenteria's Christmas bird, you know, Carpenteria's winter bird populations have been getting this really cool census where a bunch of people go out and find as many birds as they can on this particular day. And that is useful info. So it'd be great to be able to continue that. And again, even non-expert birders are super helpful with that process. Like, because again, it's not so much, can you identify all the weird rare birds that you might come across? It's like, how many house finches did we have in Carpenteria on that day? And, you know, if you've got a feeder in your backyard, you can put in, you know, you can help count house finches. You can say, oh, well, I had, you know, 13 house finches. That's good data. That's good information for us to have. So that's one thing, is continuing the census. Another thing is just, for a lot of people, this is their one day of sort of social birding all year. This is like a big deal. Like I'm out there birding all the time because I'm weird that way. But for a lot of people, you know, who have other things in their lives other than birding, this is the day of the year that they actually go out and do a collective celebration of birds and birding. And it's a great thing to do that. I get a lot out of it, and I think a lot of people get a lot out of it. And we can do that, you know, in a somewhat limited way this year because of the pandemic, but we can do that as well. And then the third thing is just sort of for fun, which is the competition of it all. And I get caught up in that, as you can hear, as I'm talking about the big kid beating us up for our lunch money next door in the Santa Barbara count. I would love for us to get to 160 species. The actual day of the count, we'll use a spreadsheet to keep track. So here's a graph, by the way, of over time, you know, how many species we've had in each year. And you see some years are better than others. Day of the count, we'll have this spreadsheet, and basically it lists all the species we've ever had. And this is the need tab. This is the tab this is from last year. This is last year's field spreadsheet that we used to keep track of what we had and didn't have. These are the birds we did not have. And they're sorted by these categories. Category 1 birds are birds we've had in every Christmas count in Carpenteria up to that point. And it still bothers me that these 2 category 1 birds we'd had in every count up to that, we did not get last year. And that was on me. That was just bad organizing. We didn't get a sanderling. We didn't get a red-winged blackbird. A red-winged blackbird. How could you not get a red-winged blackbird? So this year, as you are all my witness, we will get a red-winged blackbird in the Christmas count if I can make it happen. So yeah, Brody, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask. So the Christmas count, how long is it? Is it like 1 day or?
That is a good question. So the window is 3 weeks, right? That's the time during which you can have the count, and every count is on a different day, or there aren't, you know, enough days for them to all be on different days, but they try and avoid overlaps within an area. So if people want to do more than one, they can do more than one. And Carpenteria is usually the first Saturday of the count window, and the Santa Barbara Christmas count is usually the last Saturday of the count window.
You can do it wherever you want to, right? So like you can like go to the beach and go like to the wherever you want, right?
Yeah, and what'll happen is if you use that sign up form, the information will come into me, and it asks things like, you know, where do you have any preference on where you bird, or with whom you want to bird? Have you done it before have you done this count before? And if so, where did you do it? And things like that. And then I will sit down, and we'll actually cover this in future meetings of this group, because we have a few more meetings before the count, and I probably will continue to talk about the Christmas count in those meetings. We'll figure out, you know, it's sort of like, it's like a, you know, a battle plan. We want to put our forces in the best places. Like certain places tend to really get, you know, a high chance of getting a species we're not going to get any other way. Like there's a pelagic trip, you know, hopefully we can get Dave Perexta, who has done it for us in the past, to go out on this boat out of Santa Barbara and cover the part of our circle that is out in the water. So if you look, we've got this, and Rob is very, very clever the way he set up our circle. We have a little bit of ocean out here, and it actually gets right up to where some of the oil platforms are. So if we can get our boat out there and it goes around there, there's a good chance of getting some pelagic bird species in our circle. So that's one place that's really important. Another place that's really important for us to get to, if we can, is way up in the backcountry on the other side of the Santa Ynez Crest is Jameson Lake, this little lake here. And it's hard to get to. You basically have to take a whole day to bird that location, and you have to get special permission to get in there. But the dam caretaker there at Jameson Lake has been very helpful in getting us access out there the last several years. So we can go out there, and if we can get some sort of adventurous birders with some, you know, high clearance vehicle, and they can get out on the dirt roads out to that location, that's a really helpful place where we will get birds we won't otherwise get. But other than that, it's a lot of, you know, different little birding spots in and around Carpinteria. And yeah, you know, if there's someplace you particularly want to bird, then let me know when you fill out the sign up form. There's a question about that, and I will do my best to assign you to that area. We try and, you know, there's an actual assignment process where you get, you know, a particular location that's your spot. There's also a fair amount of overlap. You know, I do my best to recruit some sort of high-powered birders to come in, and I just want them roaming everywhere. I'm just like, go wherever you want to go, and, you know, hit the highlights and see what you can come up with for those people. So there's a lot of different sorts of things, and as we get closer, we'll get more info about that. Yeah.
Where is the sign-up sheet?
It is a Google Docs form. And again, if you go to the Carp Without Cars blog, carpwithoutcars.org/CBC, there is a page for this count, and there is a link there. This link is the thing that takes you to the sign-up form. And we'll send out emails as well. I think most of you we have on an email list for promoting these meetings, and I will put out the official call for participation email to that email list probably within the next week or so. Okay, well, I could talk more about the Christmas count, but I want to save some for next time. And any other questions about it though, while we're here discussing it? I am excited about the count this year. Cautiously optimistic. Every year I want to do better. Every year I want to, do a better job of organizing it, get more people, have more fun birding. So hopefully this will be another year in which we can do that and make progress towards 160 species. I know it's doable. Up in Santa Barbara, they're getting 200 every year. Those birds are there to be found. We just have to, we have to scout them. We have to find out where they are. This is kind of the thing that Paul Lehman, I think, I mentioned before, I've read Joan Lentz's recent book, Story of a Santa Barbara Birder. And in that book, she talks about the process of how the Santa Barbara Christmas bird count came to be. She organized it and ran it for many years. And Paul Lehman, the author of Birds of Santa Barbara County, which I've talked about before, was a big part of sort of figuring out this approach to birding back in the 1970s and 80s, that these wintering species, these wintering vagrants, you get individual birds that really don't belong there, but with all these exotic plantings like Cape honeysuckle and some of these flowering eucalyptus trees, birds that normally would winter in Central America and South America, a few of them, like one or two individuals, will overwinter here in Southern California. They'll find a conducive spot, and their migratory radar is kind of haywire the first time they made the migration, and they ended up here instead of in Guatemala or wherever they were supposed to be. And it worked, so they just keep coming back. And you can identify the specific food plants that they're hanging out in, and the same individual birds will come back to the same location year after year, like Jenny's Acosta's hummingbird, right? That hopefully will still be there on December 19th, and you can get that for the count like you did last year. The orchard oriole along Santa Monica Creek near my house, I saw it the other day. It's back, or it could be, there may have been a changing of the guard, because there was an immature male orchard oriole there in last year's count. There's an adult male there now, so hopefully we'll get it on count day. And with a little more, careful gathering of intelligence and scouting, and we can get all these birds staked out the way they do up in Santa Barbara, and we can get a good high number on count day. So that'll be a lot of what I'm focusing on for the next several weeks, is figuring out where all these birds are so we can get them on December 19th, hopefully. And then it'll rain and we won't get anything, we'll get a low number. It's just the way it goes sometimes, but, or maybe the weather will be good. Okay, so before we wrap up, any other questions or comments or anything about that?
So when's the next time that you will meet with all of us?
Well, I'm planning to just sort of take over these bi-weekly meetings of Carpinteria Birdwatchers to talk about the Christmas count. So 2 weeks from today.
Okay.
There may be some other content. I'll see. I'm going to be all Christmas count all the time between now and the count probably. So I'll be talking about the Christmas count. But 2 weeks, 4 p.m., 2 weeks from today, we'll send out their usual email about the upcoming meeting. Yeah, Brody.
I was gonna ask if we could do warblers or seabirds next 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, I will see. My time is kind of, I know from having done the count, having organized the count a few times, my available time just gets shrunk down very small. And I want to be out there scouting birds. I want to be out there, like I always want to be out birding anyway, but I have an extra excuse now between now and the Christmas count. I want to go find these rarities and figure out where they are and figure out how to see them and get better at identifying, what time of day are they there, and, are they findable? Because a big part of the decision making for the organizing is, okay, there are all these different species we can try to get. There's all these different locations we can try to bird. But, the key best birding time in the morning when the birds are vocalizing and active and easier to find is pretty limited. So depending on how many people we have, we really, where those people go early in the morning or for their outing is significant in terms of the numbers we come up with. So the more I can figure out about what birds are where. Anyway, it will be hard for me to put a presentation together because I'm going to be birding all the time. And when I'm not birding, I'm going to be organizing the count and processing form submissions. And but I'll see. We could also, maybe revisit a group of birds that we've done before, where I wouldn't have to create a new presentation, or something else may come up that suggests an idea for a future meeting. But I'm leaning towards not really preparing any special meeting content between now and the Christmas count, just so I can focus on the Christmas count. And the next few meetings may be sort of shorter meetings where we just talk about the count, or people who are participating in the count or interested in the count will find it interesting. But others may just want to wait until after the count. We can get back to normal and talk about cool birds. Okay, anything else from anyone? Okay, well, thank you all for showing up and participating. And I obviously had a fun time talking about this. I get excited, I'll just start talking about it all day. But go out and see some good birds, and 2 weeks from now, we'll get back together and we'll talk more about the Christmas count or about what cool birds we've been seeing. So thanks, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.